All right, welcome everybody to this conversation on the Fourth Generation Initiative. Today I'm joined by a very special guest whom we hope will be a more, frequent face on on this platform that is still committed to, political education and conscientization for our future. Mr. Godson Nwankwo. We'll get the opportunity to talk and we'll engage with in a second. But just to reiterate, the Fourth Generation Initiative, as we've always mentioned, exists for the principal task of conscientization. And that just simply means raising the level of political awareness and consciousness of Africa's next generation of leaders, right? If we conceive of ourselves as being the fourth in 3 or 4 generations of leaders that have existed on the continent so far, our task, as it were, is to prepare ourselves for, the mission that we have as a generation. And that means that we have to know that mission, to be able to prosecute it. We always go back to what Frantz Fanon said, right? That every generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it, right? And the process of discovering that mission is what we term as conscientization. And that comes from having a good appreciation of history, right? And this is going to be the basis of the new conversations that we're going to have, the appreciation of history, historical analysis. Where are we coming from, right? Is the first question. The second question is, where we are now and where are we going, right? And the way we answer the question of where we are going and how we get there is on the basis of our appreciation of where we've come from and how we've gotten here, right? And we want to apply those same tools, as it were, of analysis now to Nigeria, Africa's most populous, I believe, and one of the biggest heavyweights. I always think, Godson, I always think of Nigeria as some kind of hegemon in Africa, at least culturally. At least culturally, I feel like you all are the hegemons. But a quick background. So we wanted to have, Godson on this platform for quite a while because of his contributions on the ground, things that he's doing both in Nigeria but also around the continent for a while to advance the work of political education, but also to prepare young people for leadership, right? And leadership preparation is something that we need to take seriously. We cannot stop preparing leaders because society is going to continue. Even beyond us, society will still exist, right? So the mission to prepare a new generation of leaders to lead society well in the direction that we want it to go is not a mission that we can relent on. And Godson has been at the front and center of that work. I think we met at a fellowship, where you are one of the fellows and I was part of the support staff, and I think that is where we grew to learn more of each other and the work that I was doing. So we're very excited to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Olemo. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the work that you are doing with the Fourth Generation Initiative. So I'm so happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversations that we're going to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, to just go back to again how we met. I think then we were on a platform again that was dedicated to that task of preparing public sector leaders. This was Future Africa, right? And they had a fellowship that was meant to help people understand the systems as they are, right? Present day systems as they are in order to engage within, but also to kind of take on that system, right? So I think that was the context in which we met. So I'll just maybe begin with maybe your experience of that, right? What your experience of that platform was, and maybe the work that derived from that, to try and usher the conversation in the direction that we wanted to.
Okay. Thank you very much once again. So the Future Africa Fellowship, I think I always see that it is a launching pad for me. You know, prior to the Future Africa Fellowship, I was just a young person, I was passionate about participating in our democracy. I mean, I've been involved in some kind of advocacy, being part of some movement in Nigeria at that time, starting from campus and then graduating from school. But then I was looking for a community or a tribe where I can draw inspiration, and most especially where I can, get more knowledge to understand the systems that govern our societies, and that would be able to help me to engage in the right direction. And that's when I came to Future Africa Fellowship. It was an eye-opening fellowship in all the ways I can imagine, especially the readings we had to do, the conversations we had to do about democracy, about citizens' participation, policy, public policy. It was a whole lot. So I came in and I saw young Africans like myself who also share the same passion that I share for public service, and who were already doing, amazing things in their countries. And for like 1 year, every Saturday we gather to share ideas, we gather to talk about democracy in the continent, we read, we do simulations. And at that time I had never ever participated in something like that before, and it sparked my interest. The conversations every Saturday, it sparked my interest, and then sometimes I go back to like read more on the reading notes that we were given to read at that time. So, and then when we started working on the policy, which was our capstone project for graduation, where I was the lead for my team, working on education, entrepreneurship, and employability in Nigeria. You know, and I've never had to research about the Nigerian policy or education system before. But that fellowship now gave me insight to like go back and read about our education system, download all the policies that we've had from 1977 when we had our first indigenous education policy, and it was now where the interest for the work that I do now, that was where the foundation, that was where it sparked from. And we finished that, we did our presentation. And as I was finishing the fellowship, the then speaker of the Federal House of Representatives, my country, which is currently the chief of staff to the president, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, launched another program for public sector leaders in Nigeria, and it was the ideas and the things I learned from Future Africa that I pitched to LMI, and luckily I was the only person selected from my state, because it was like statewide, the whole country. So I was the person selected from my state, and then I moved from there, and I feel like that was where the journey started, to now make sense, to look like there's a direction to what we want to achieve, and yeah, I feel like that's Future Africa was the foundation where I caught the spark and inspiration to do the things that I'm doing currently.
Yeah. So it kind of gave the inspiration to take the study of society more seriously. You know,
Absolutely.
part of why I think one of the things that you mentioned for me is reading, right? The role of like critically understanding society. And we from the beginning we've been speaking about this on this platform, that a lot of young people are eager to engage with the reality of our politics, right? A lot of people are eager to change things. A lot of people are eager to bring some kind of transformation to society, but many people do not have an appreciation of the work that has to go into understanding society. There's something that Mao used to say, that if you do not investigate, you lose the right to speak, right? That you must
Absolutely.
investigate, you must not talk nonsense. So it's that kind of like understanding of, I have to, let's say, the question of education and employment, right?
Yeah,
The acknowledgement that you and I are not the first people to engage with such issues,
you will not.
right? So has this issue evolved and evolved over time, right? Who are the players? Who are the central people? Who are the stakeholders, right? What are their interests? Some kind of like political economy analysis at work, right? Has let's say education in Nigeria evolved from, say, before Nigeria was a reality, right, to when we embraced, let's say, formal education systems, if it did not exist before, to where we are right now. So I'm glad that you bring that up again, because that is really the role that, the initiative seeks to bring up. That can we spark people to begin thinking seriously about society and social change, right? Because if we are not reading, if you're not understanding things critically, then at the end of the day, we're just going to be pedestrians.
Yeah, true.
We're just going to be making noise. We're just going to go to social media, and there's
Absolutely.
nothing productive that is going to be happening.
Yeah.
So just to go back to the state, the program that you did with the state afterward, what is your assessment of some of these programs? Are there many states that are intentional within Nigeria, that is, that are intentional about creating like leadership preparation programs and maybe pipelines for young people to get into leadership? And how well of a job are they doing? Is there a translation of people going through these programs, getting into like
Florence.
the formal leadership positions
Yeah.
themselves? And when they do, is there, because I know a lot of them are focused on like the ethics of leadership, right?
Yeah, true,
Is
true,
that,
true.
do you think that's translating?
Yeah, I would say it's translating. So let me start with the one I did, which was particularly focused on legislators. It's
Mm,
Legislative Mentorship Initiative. So um, there is something Honorable Femi Bajabiamila will always say that nation building is a joint task, right? And then the younger generation are the greatest partners in the journey of nation building. And that was what actually inspired him to launch that platform to bring young Nigerians to the National Assembly. We spent 5 weeks at the National Assembly studying Nigeria as a country, our political system, our economy, the politics that happens in the National Assembly, electioneering process, public policies, case studies. Like it was a whole lot. The historical development of the country, the ideology of nation building. So we did all of those studies, and then we interacted with lawmakers because it was residents at the National Assembly. We interacted with lawmakers, um, the committees at the various committees in the House of Representatives, right? And then after the program, we have an alumni platform. So many of the alumni have gone ahead to like serve in government from that particular fellowship. So we have people now who are technical advisors to the current senior special assistant to the president of Nigeria on international cooperation. It's from my sets. We have someone who's working with the senior special assistant to the president on creative enterprising, like from creative sector. Sorry, it's also from my set. We have people who's working with the speaker of the House of Reps now as legislative head. So the LMI became a pipeline, to
mm,
to those kind of channels, and where young people are learning, they are being mentored through those process. So even though it's not many of us, but maybe a few of us, and through that platform as well,
mm.
we have policy platforms where we engage with the National Assembly. So I would say it's translating, but not on a large scale. So I feel like it's a gradual process, right? Because most of the people now in my set who are already working with these people at the corridors of power, they're already learning leadership and building relationships and network and strategic connections within the political environment in Nigeria. Then, as to regards whether there are some states who are running some programs, yes, we have the Kaduna state under the governorship of Malam El Rufai, who started the Kashim Ibrahim Fellowship. And the Kashim Ibrahim Fellowship it was designed in such a way that you are selected and then you are seconded as either as a special advisor to the governor, or you work with the commissioner, and your job is to you shadow the executive cabinet to learn the workings of governance at the state level, right? And for 1 year, you serve as either a special advisor to the governor or to the commissioner or within the state executive council. And a lot of young people who have served or who have passed through that fellowship today, some of them have run for office even though they didn't win. Some are working with the Kaduna state government, and some are also working in the public sector, in Nigeria. I have a couple of them as friends. And then we have the one that is currently being run in Lagos State, which we call the Latif Jakande Fellowship. It's still the same model. Actually, it's actually somebody that participated in Latif Jakande that sold the idea to the governor of Lagos State, and the fellowship was established. Yeah.
Okay.
They go to Singapore for a policy trip, like Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, So they also serve as special advisors to the government of Lagos State. But that one did not have a process of them continuing after the fellowship. But I feel like it opens their eyes, because what LMI did to me was to open my eyes to understand the politics of Nigeria from the National Assembly, right? And the kind of effort that goes into advocating for things that comes back to your community, especially as a lawmaker. The negotiation, the lobbying, building relationship across the regional blocks, for you to be able to get something. So it opened my eyes to those kind of politics, and then also opened a lot of network. I built lifelong mentors who have given me a lot of opportunities, today. So it's for me one thing I think we need, and that is also the connection to why I launched the fellowship that I launched. Because after that, I wrote to my state governor to start such kind of initiative for my state, because the fellowship actually selects a very few number of people. So after the fellowship, I've gone ahead to serve in the review committee of the subsequent fellows. So like every year we receive like 5,000, 6,000 applications, and they only have 50 slots. So there are thousands of young people who have beautiful stories, doing amazing things in their communities, who are passionate about public service. You could see it in their stories, but there are not enough of this platform to build this kind of pipeline for the leadership that we need tomorrow. So we need a lot of these kind of fellowships across the states. Even if all the states in Nigeria decide to like start one, it won't still be enough, right? But to a long extent, or to a large extent, I would say that yes, it is actually translating to helping young people, get into political leadership, and also the ideology and the orientation, for a different kind of public service, and how we need to move our country forward. So yeah, it is. But then again, my governor, I didn't succeed in that advocacy. But it's one advocacy I'm doing across all the states. Even now in Plateau State, we're having a conversation also to establish that kind of fellowship. In Adamawa State, we're developing policy briefs, citing comparative analysis of what these fellowships have done in other states in Nigeria, and why we need more of it. Because most times the fellowship do not even need a lot of money. The governor's name alone is enough for a lot of people who want to invest. Yeah, so your name is all that you need, for to just start the fellowship. There are a lot of people who are willing.
And this
I'm
has the
telling
backing
you,
of the governor, and then partners will come
exactly,
on board.
exactly. So, but I don't know. Yeah, but I can say that it is translating. It's translating, and it's making a lot of impact.
Yeah. Godson, we're going to come back to the policy advocacy and leadership
Mm,
fellowship, which is, the one that you launched. And I know we
mm.
haven't yet introduced what this series of conversations that we are going to engage in over the next couple of weeks and maybe years is about, because society is going to outlive us. So maybe this is going to be a series that we're
Yeah.
going to have for a long time. But I want to, before we talk about the work that you are doing currently, as a precursor to the overall, conversation on Nigeria, West Africa, ECOWAS, and the likes. I want to take you back to this question of, there's a distinction, and it's very important, the intervention of these fellowships, right? Which
Mm,
is, and it is very important. I think leadership is such, it's such an intricate thing, because you need to learn two things. You need to learn society as it is,
yeah.
right? But at the same time, you want to kind of portend a new vision for society, right? you want to understand how Nigeria works right now,
Yeah.
but you also want to and you also want to understand how Nigeria has come to be the way it is,
It
right?
is.
Why do we have a federal government, right? Why do we have a state system? Why do you have kind of some of the challenges that we have today? And I do not know how much in depth some of these, programs that you went to
Challenges, yeah.
in some of these challenges. But so there are two things. There's diagnosis, right? A proper diagnosis, that is understanding society as it is, right? And also, even apart from diagnosis, just the intervention of some of these programs, right? Saying, okay, how has River State or Oyo State, right,
Yeah.
come to be the way it is right now? How does Oyo State operate? The question of how Oyo State operates, so that if I want to one day be a representative at a local level there,
Yeah.
I know what to do, right? It's very
True.
different from should Oyo State be operating like the way it's operating right now. So
Yeah.
there's the question of politics as it is and
Yeah.
politics as it ought to be,
Be.
right? So
Yeah.
my question for you would be, from your experience with some of these programs, do you think it's intervening sufficiently in answering the question of what a new Nigeria ought to look like, but also helping you diagnose the challenges with Nigeria as it is and appreciating how Nigeria has come to be the way it is, so that ultimately, right, we can now mobilize towards a new Nigeria? Because obviously it's a good thing, it's a good intervention. Young people, you said, in their numbers, in their thousands, right? People are interested in knowing how systems operate. It's very important. You must know how the current system operates, because when you want to make a change in society, you're not going to it's not going to fall from heaven. You need to appreciate
It's
things
not.
as they are. Uh-huh.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But so
So,
so do you think the intervention, from at least the time that you spent there, that there's enough of an appreciation of, or there's enough of a critique of the current vision of what society is, and an attempt to move beyond the current vision to what society ought to be? I can understand how parliament works,
yeah.
but do I question the current configuration of our parliament and the way that the politics of parliament operates? If you
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying.
I understand.
Mm.
Okay. So I I think this is a lot, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then let me start from um, maybe the way politics it's in Nigeria, and that give us an insight into understanding whether these interventions actually get towards, you know, solving the problems that we have in the society. So politics in Nigeria is cabalistic in the sense that the political elite distributes political power based on loyalty to their vision or to their political um, I'll be using some word now, political dynasty. Yeah.
Mm.
So if I want to run for an office to represent my people at the state assembly, for instance, the way politics ought to be, it actually mean sharing my vision with the people, right? Because in democracy, power lies with the people, and they are the ones I'm seeking their mandates to go and represent them, right? But the reverse is the case. You have to get the validation of the person who controls that constituency, which could either be the governor or maybe a former governor or a political godfather within that constituency, right? So if you do not get his approval, you cannot get in. You know, you probably just want to go in, run for office, do your campaign, but at the end of the day, there's a selection process that has happened, anointed candidate that comes, and it's
Mm.
people within their own system. So it's a bit frustrating in some way,
Mm.
and then you also ask yourself, when you go through some of these programs, there's a lot of ideas, that come out. There is a lot of inspirations, a lot of learnings, a lot of conversations, imaginations, and political imaginations that happen. But then it seems like it ends within those rooms because you
Mm.
have the passion, you have received the training, you are even within that corridors of power, but still you do not have that access, you know, yes, to get that maybe validation that now takes you, you to be the candidates that people want. So these interventions, I would say, it's there to reorient the minds of the young people and to also prepare them for the public service that is not accessible to them. So it's just like you are being prepared for something that you do not know what that knowledge is going to help you to do. Like where you want to apply that knowledge is not accessible to you, but you are
It's not a science. It's not a science that because now you have this knowledge, there's this vast
exactly.
amount of opportunity to serve society.
Exactly. So the opportunities for you to now practicalize or to test the strength of your ideas based on what has been invested into you, it's not there. So even the opportunities that our people get is still within the peripheral. So they are not key decision making opportunities. So what you call tokenism, and it's also a big deal because a lot of people are looking for it, right? A lot of people are looking for it. So people even get to celebrate, if you are appointed maybe an SA to the governor and SA. Sometimes you will not even meet the governor throughout the tenure, but you are a special advisor to the governor, advising
Yeah.
him on maybe education, but you don't have access to meet him. So you have to lobby to actually meet him. That's if at all the gatekeepers within the system will allow you to
They
meet
allow you to have access.
the person that you are advising.
Just
So
very very quickly, it reminds me of a joke that people have made in Uganda with our president who has I think over 100 and something odd advisors. And people often say that he's the one who advises his advisors. It's not his advisors who who are it's not his advisors who are advising him. He's the one who is advising them. But yeah, so that's definitely emblematic of a big challenge, right? That
yeah,
as you mentioned that even if people get to this position in the first place, right, it's at the very margins. That it's not an influential position to make
yeah,
any meaningful change.
change
And worse still, at the end of the day, um, they are still within the same old framework of politics.
the same
They
old
sort of become.
framework of policy.
uh
So
it's
because you there is nothing, even if you come in with an idea, an ideology, and that is why for me, one of the things I'm always particular about is the ideology of the leaders I see in every room that I enter. The people I see that are probably very close to the corridors of power and might be the tomorrow's leaders, right? The ideologies in many ways are not very different from current political system that we have now. But then when you get in or maybe you are appointed as an SA, you cannot influence any change because whatever you are doing is controlled, right? Like whatever you are doing is censored. You don't have that power to make decisions. So you can only play to the tune or the direction that you are being controlled to play. So some people get frustrated in the process. Some actually resign maybe just to keep their integrity. But it's actually very difficult because, and it's also frustrating in many ways because you know you have the ideas that can at least move society forward in some way, but you need to now understand the politics to play to make that idea happen, right? So there's a place of having an idea and there's a place of understanding the politics that can make that idea survive within the corridors of power, which you don't have the political power to actually orchestrate based on the position that you occupy. And it's by design. Actually, it's by design because most politicians look out for vocal young people within their communities, and then they target them with disappointments, right? And when you don't have maybe strong personal convictions, you can be tempted by those appointments, at least being close to the corridors of power. You are carried away by that, and when you get in, they've succeeded in silencing your voice, you know, which they consider a threat to them, because in Nigeria, I think like the greatest threat to our politicians are critical thinking citizens who have
Yeah.
who are informed, you know, about what needs to be done, who holds the leadership accountable, and who challenges the status quo at every time, and who also have a large followership of people that they can indoctrinate, you know, or
Yeah.
actually educate. So when they target those people, you they target you with appointments, and you know, and if you fell for it, perhaps that's where you now become you can no longer speak
Mm. You've been effectively neutralized. And I think
neutralized.
as we go on with this series, one of the things that we're going to do definitely is to critique some of the movements that we've had in Nigeria, right?
Mm,
Particularly the youth led movements and figures that have come up to try and impress upon the nation a new imagination of the country,
yeah,
right? And see how effective some of their mobilization, or which, because I think that's what much of it has been, their mobilization and organizational strategies have been, right?
that's
But
been
to go back to this kind of I think this ideology of accommodation and survival, I think a big challenge that exists, right, with all these and I think it's what education within the status quo does in any part of the world, right? It's really propaganda essentially. I think there is sometimes a conflation of patriotism and nation building politics, right?
mm,
With a politics of maintaining the status quo,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it's like because we confuse that, okay, loving my country somehow becomes accepting the reality of what the country is right now, right? And working within the framework of what exists. And so now you find in all these platforms that there is this ideology of accommodation and survival, right? That you accommodate politics as it is, that you accept the current political reality. And because the people that you're encountering, they have resigned for the most part. Many of these people, either they are actively perpetuating the system, or even if I'm sure you've met a lot of such elements who
yeah,
do not
absolutely,
agree with this, how this they don't agree with how the system works, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
they have resigned. They're just like,
yes,
this is how it is, right?
it
Things
is
cannot
going to be,
change, right? They
yeah,
think the
yeah,
problem is too intractable. They think, systems are so entrenched, people are so, entrenched that nothing can essentially change. I'm
change,
sure you've met a lot of people like that. So I think that
absolutely,
ideology of accommodation and survival is what I'm hearing is that it's very prevalent within such programs, right? We
it
learn
is,
about how the system is as it is.
yeah,
We have these kinds of meetings where we have breakfast together, we enjoy a good time because there's some little money there. And because you are passionate, right? They tap into that passion and zeal that you have to lead people. And before you know it, you've been effectively neutralized.
neutralized.
Mm, mm,
I mean, and then there's also a lot of contradictions of patriotism in my
mm,
country, and you rightly describe it. So in
mm,
Nigeria today, we have different, maybe different kind of people in the nation. So we have people who their love for country is based on their access to power at the time,
mm,
right?
mhm,
So if I have access to the current administration and I benefit, so I'm going to be protective of Nigeria. So I'm going to be speaking good about Nigeria,
mhm,
irrespective of the reality. Maybe whether the reality is saying something differently. So you see that national conversations are now divided along extremes without nuance, right? And then there's a group of people who are not in power. They now become very loud advocates. Maybe 4 years ago, they were very quiet
yeah,
about
power.
issues because they were in power, right? So
Yeah.
they were very quiet about the issues. They were the very big patriot of Nigeria. And if you try to criticize the system, they try to shut you down that you are being
Mm,
negative about the country. You do not love your country. So their love for country is based on their access to power and the benefits that they get from the corridors of power, right? And then there are also other people who just love the nation. They are frustrated about everything that is happening, and they feel like, okay, my country do not have anything to offer me, and So me, I've resigned, like you said. I met somebody who told me in 2020, and he said that things will never change. Actually, that was actually when I was starting out, and he has been a very big figure. Done a lot of things in the civil society, lead a lot of advocacies, and then he told me, he said that Nigeria will never change, and that is the reality. But then at that point, I really felt that okay, that word is extreme, because irrespective of the challenges and the impossible odds that we see, we still have to carry the hope, because hope is the only tool that we have, to shape the future. Whether things are good now or not, we have hope that someday something is going to change if we do what we must do, right? So he completely detached himself. He left the country, went abroad, and is living a very silent life. And then most of the things he told me in 2020, I've now come to actually encounter them personally in my journey. And sometimes I do sit back and reflect and also question, my own beliefs and my own hope, whether or not you understand. So, but then
Yeah.
there is a quote that always keeps me going by Barack Obama, where he said that in the face of impossible odds, those who love their country can save it, right? I'm optimistic, but then I'm also aware of the realities and how the systems work. And I
Yeah.
believe that maybe someday the way society works, something is going to happen, the change is going to happen within the system. Because for me now, the only thing that has to change for us is our political system. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I know that these peer-to-peer conversations, these educations, these kind of conversations we are having in small groups, in small towns, big cities, coming together, expressing our anger, we one day lead to how that change is going to happen. But as for now, it seems like the system is almost impossible to change, and you have all of the ideas, you have all of the passion, you even have some kind of assets, but those assets does not translate to maybe some of the change you want to see, right? Maybe you want to see some policy change, you have ideas, and then you have some assets within governments, government, the corridors of power. Like probably some ministers, some commissioners, some lawmakers, like I do. But then even them too, you can also now find out that they are also fighting within the system.
The
you know
system, yeah.
and exactly. So some of them will also come back to complain to you that these things are not working their friend, and then you are now asking you that you are here
You,
and we are inside the system, and then they are telling you that the
if
system
you're
is
complaining,
so it's just some kind of things that the
yeah.
reality that we find ourselves. But there is hope. There is hope that something can change with the kind of um,
Mm.
mass knowledge that is happening now, awareness. People are beginning to like get angry. People, in fact, 2 days ago, a protocol officer to the governor went to address some youths. They were trying to like, he was trying to tell them to like why the governor needs to return, and they used bottle to broke his head, right? So there was like, there's an anger that is brewing, the mood of the nation. Young people are angry, they are restless, they are using social media to attack the states. It's just it's everybody. It's like people are being pushed to the breaking point right now, and it's leading to awareness. People are pushing themselves to like, okay, they're even like trying to get political education. Let's get our PVC. You could see ordinary people, market women, trying to mobilize at that level for them to get a PVC, so that they can vote in the next election and vote out bad leadership. So there is a silent revolution
Mm.
of knowledge that is happening, of awareness, but it is yet to get to a critical mass. And I'm sure that when
Mm.
it gets to a critical mass, that collective consciousness will now lead to the actions, perhaps that we give us the kind of change that we want, you know.
It,
But then you
it,
also want to ask, finally, just before you
yeah.
come in, I'm also sometimes concerned about, let's say we have a political change now, or maybe a regime change. Who are the next set of people, who will take over leadership? Do we even have the courageous leaders who can steer the path to greatness. So there is also a problem of leadership deficit. As much as we have so many leaders, so there are so many leaders, but then we have few leaders who understands the system, who understands our polities, who understand our realities, who understand our complexities. I do get worried about Nigerians, those who are close to be the next president of Nigeria, about their ideas. I've listened to them, I've listened to what they have to say, and it's still repeating the same things that we already know. So nobody is coming up with unconventional ideas that we feel like, okay, we need this radicalism to move this society forward. So there is also a problem of if this society actually achieves a regime change or maybe a ballot revolution, right? Will it lead to the nation that we want, or with this new set of leaders, do they actually have what it takes, to mobilize the citizens towards the kind of country that we want? So it's a whole lot of dilemma that we find ourselves right now. But yeah, I don't want to
So,
say
so
something.
we can, yeah, we can say there's leadership and there's leadership. You can have, you can have so many people
Yeah,
who call themselves leaders, but then there is actually people who are taking leadership, right?
yeah,
Who have a new vision for society and they are advancing them in that direction. There's a lot that you bring up. One of the we recently circulated on our Substack an article from a conversation that we had with one of the people who has been a frequent feature on this platform, who has contributed a lot to our work, was Trevor Luere. And
okay,
in that conversation that we had with him, he's mentioned something about being a slave of hope, right? And I remember we spoke in that conversation. He was saying something that hope underlies all the work that we do. The reason
yeah,
why we do political education is because we are hopeful that society can change, right?
change,
But
yeah.
obviously, hope itself is not a strategy,
It's
right?
nice strategy,
And
that's true.
underlying that hope needs to be a clear strategy about how we can move forward. But also, I think, as you mentioned, just to go back to the question of patriotism, some people think that patriotism is just a blind love for country. And
To
and I'm in the US right now, and that's very prevalent even in this country, that people think that when you critique a country, right? Not necessarily criticize, but which criticism is good because you criticize what you're passionate about. But people
about,
think that when you critique a system, then somehow you're not patriotic. And I think that's a very misinformed view, right? That when you give a critique of a country and you say this is what it looks like. It's like when you diagnose a problem, there should never be an issue when you say this person is sick. It's like naming the problem is an issue. No, it's not an issue. It's how you begin to move on from the problem. It's a very
from the
critical
top.
step. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's just to say that. But even if we have a righteous anger, as you've mentioned, that young people are getting more frustrated, young people are getting angry, it's just to say that there must then be that they must be more clear-eyed, right? We must have a good appreciation of the actual challenges of society, and then when we're talking of the critical mass, mobilize intentionally to see
yeah,
that people move on from there, right? And have a vision of society that can actually move to move forward. So maybe to circle back and see how we can head towards the close of this foundational discussion that we are having. Um, so this series that we are starting, just maybe to introduce it at this point, this series that we are starting is about, in the spirit of the fourth generation initiative, asking the critical questions, right? Doing a sustained diagnosis of Nigeria's contemporary political and economic challenges, right? And the two questions that are motivating this is really the how and why questions, right? How did we
yeah,
get here? Why are we here, right? Essentially, and how do we move from here, right? Sometimes I feel like as Africans, we are so fixated on how do we move from here without a proper diagnosis of how we got here, right? And so we're not really, it's not about lamentation. I think enough people are lamenting, right? Um, but it's talking about how do we understand the underlying structures, how do we move, how do we diagnose what the problems are. Sometimes we think, for example, I always tell people, sometimes we think, for example, that everybody's interested in a politics of moving forward, right? But we sometimes do not even have enough appreciation of how invested people are in the current vision of society, right? And like the moral courage that it takes to get even the people themselves that we often romanticize into moving into a new vision of society, right? So we'll be addressing as time goes on, the political culture of the country, what the interest of the different groups are. You hinted at something at the start about this cabal and this political elite, and maybe we'll try and examine what does the current political settlement in Nigeria look like, right? So that if there's any young person out there who wants to engage with politics, they can, they know what is happening. And then we'll try and interrogate, obviously, history, um, security, some of those big questions, and then eventually Nigeria's role in the region, right? And in Africa at large, because understanding is critical, right? We can be angry all we want, but if we are not invested in raising the level of our political consciousness, I think a bigger and even worse risk than running the system as it is that we we kind of criticize the system, we become, and then we eventually just become the people that we criticized. You know, there's a speech that the current president of Uganda made in 1986 when he was taking power with this group, the NRM. And he mentioned, you were talking about how you look at the current crop of leaders and people who may take over the reins of the state, and they don't look like they are, harbingers of a new politics, right? So he said something. He said that in 1986 that, oh, this is not a mere change of guard, right? This is fundamental change. So revolutionary politics, and that's one of the things we're going to interrogate in this series. What does a revolutionary politics actually look like in Nigeria, right? Was, for example, Peter Obi, where a lot of young people rallied over, a revolutionary in that sense. Like, what does true revolution look like in this day and age? Like, how do we make a break with the past? And what is the past that we're trying to make a break with? So that is the direction we're going to take with this series of conversations that we're going to have, because obviously Nigeria is a different kind of society. 220 million people within this polity. That is, it's effectively a society of, it's a multinational state, essentially. Uh-huh. So its challenges they'll be similar, but in the grand scheme, but it will be quite different, from other countries. So I'm excited for where this series is going. And I was reading an article this morning. Maybe this is how we'll start our next conversation. By a Nigerian on Substack, and they were talking about the challenge of they they didn't say it in those terms, but there was something about anti-intellectualism. So they were decrying the fact that in Nigeria, and I think this is an African problem really, when you try to think critically about society, people people often end with the question of, okay, yes, but what will you do about it? And that is just supposed to stop you from thinking, right? Because apparently if you cannot do something about something, then you shouldn't understand it. And for me, that is just a hopeless politics of resignation, right? That because problems are complex, so we shouldn't make any effort at all to try and understand it. uh which is not a very um, useful tool. And somebody was talking about how, Nigeria, there's so many intellectuals and thinkers who have now just gone into different professions, But we need to separate two things: as critically understanding society to change it, and trying to live and survive within it. Those are two different things, right? So maybe on this note, Godson, if there are any maybe final words on this series of conversations that we are starting. As you are speaking, I got an idea for our next book, for the fourth generation book club. I think we might be doing some historical analysis with the soldiers of fortune. It's a potential entry into our book club. The next book that we shall be discussing is Professor Mahmoud Mamdani's Slow Poison, about Uganda. We've we've worked on a book by Gaddafi before. That was at the inception of the initiative. So we're definitely going to have a book on Nigeria, and we can talk more about that, that we can engage on. Yeah. All right, thank you. We'll definitely pick up the conversation. Till then, I think we are clear on the task. We need to understand society so that we can engage it from an informed perspective, right? We can't, ignorance is too expensive for us. It's too expensive. We would pay a very high price for not preparing ourselves well enough to engage with reality. And I'm also looking forward to the series of conversations. I'm looking forward to learning more about Nigeria. We read about Nigeria a lot. As I told you, you guys are the cultural hegemon of Africa. Somehow you found a way of being so influential, from our childhood to every part of our lives today. So I'm excited to learn more about the politics and to also inform how we engage to change that society as well. Till then, let's take care and Songambele.